So, my name is Hunor, and I want to give you a little talk about the importance of online presence, how to create things on Codepen, how to write articles, and how to have a bigger reach with all these things. Now, the first question is, why should you do these things? Opa. So, one thing is that you're going to learn a lot, especially if you're writing an article. You're going to know much more about your own topic by the end of the article than compared to when you finished. And the reason for that is you want to make sure that what you write down is correct. So you're going to double check every information you're writing. And even though you're actually trying to teach something, you're going to learn yourself a lot. The second thing is you start to get some positive reinforcement and some positive feedback. For instance, if you're doing projects on Codepen and you see yourself on the front page because you got highlighted, that will give you a boost. And I remember the first time I was learning web development, I was very overwhelmed with all the options, all the libraries, all the tools, and I was a little bit lost. Like I didn't even know if I'm using something is already obsolete or it's cool. And when you start to get these positive things from other people, then you will be much more confident about doing things. The third thing is you're gonna get collaboration options or even job offers. These things don't happen that often, but they can happen. And the last and most important is they just look good in your CV. And the reason for that is it not just shows that it shows that you're actually interested in these topics. It shows that you not just here for the money, but you try to catch up with what are the latest technologies. You're giving back to the community by writing articles and so on. And the second thing is, even if you have some job experience, as an interviewer, it's quite hard to tell what you actually did in your previous work, because probably you were working as part of a team, and probably what you were doing was not open source, so they can't really check what you actually did. And if you have these projects online, then they can check your source code and see what you do. Now, just an example, last year I published a video on SVGs and how to combine SVGs with JavaScript. And 6 days later, I got this message on my LinkedIn inbox. Someone's looking for an SVG component coder who knows how to do these things. And they reached out to me directly and they said they want to work with me. So as I said, these things don't happen that often, but they can actually happen. Now, what you should do online. The first thing that probably everyone who's doing web development is starting is they want to have their own personal website. And why you can do this and you should do this, maybe it's not the perfect start because you're going to spend a lot of time with it. And you're going to spend a lot of time because you want to make it perfect. And every time you learn something new, you want to put it in your website. Let's say you just learn a CSS precompiler, then you feel the need that you have to rewrite all the styling to use this Sass or something because the old style is not cool anymore. Even though it's actually perfectly fine and your website is not changed at all, but you're still going to spend a lot of time with it. And I did the same when I was learning TypeScript. I rewrote my website with TypeScript, even though it didn't really make sense because my website is static. And TypeScript makes more sense if you have some complex logic or data structures. And if you keep on adding cool things to your website, you're going to end up with something like a Frankenstein's website where there's a lot of things in it, but it doesn't really make sense. And the truth is, no one really going to check your source code of your personal website because people just don't really go to your GitHub profile and check what's under it. And it's much more beneficial to do smaller projects instead and just forget about them. So what I do, I'm a big fan of Codepen. And if you haven't used Codepen before, basically it's like an in-browser editor. You can log in with like 5 clicks, and then you can create a new pen where you basically add your own HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And of course, if you want to change something, like you want to have some fancier CSS dialect, you can just go to settings. You can use Sass, or you can use TypeScript if you want. If you want to add React, you can just search for React and just add it. Or you can even use any NPM packages. So it's actually quite versatile, and you can do quite many things. Now, why would you use Codepen instead of GitHub? Codepen is also having a bit of social media aspect. So there's a community around here. things get highlighted, people can like your work, and so on. For instance, you can see this one was picked by Codepen. So if you do something which is actually very cool, and you make sure that people behind Codepen see your work, then they can highlight your work. And then you're going to be on the front page, and then people can see your work, they can comment on it, they can like it, and that just gives you a boost. Now, how do you get highlighted? Now, the thing is, with most things online, just because if you do something, people won't see it. And one of the most important things is you have to do your own marketing in a way. And the way you do it with Codepen is actually quite easy, because you only have to just show this to the editors. And the easiest way for that is go to Twitter and share your work and just tag Codepen. And probably just either add a picture or some animated GIF. And if they see it, I mean, they're going to see it because you tagged them. And if they like it, they're going to highlight you on the front page. And you can see what was happening here. It just went away. But this person who is right now highlighted, he was also doing the same thing. He was just sharing this image, highlighting himself, or like just tagging his post with Codepen, and now it's highlighted. Now, if you like having a goal and like you're try to gamify this process, then one goal you could have is try to get highlighted on the front page. Like create something that is cool enough, has some nice design, has some nice colors, nice fonts, that will end up highlighted on the front page. Or if you want to even do even more, then you can get even featured in their weekly newsletter, which is an email, but you can also see yourself back here. Basically, these are the best things from the last week. Now, what to do, what projects you should do on Codepen. Mainly, you can do some short projects, like you don't want to spend weeks and months on it. One of my favorite things I did, and this is one of the first things I did on Codepen, is this countdown. Basically, I was just learning about 3D transformations in CSS. And I was thinking, how could I use 3D transformations? Because you don't really need that on the web. And then I just clicked that when you go to a cinema and before the movie, you see this countdown, like all these numbers are twisting and turning and doing all those things. And I was just thinking, could I do this with CSS? And the cool thing about this, if you check it, it's roughly 50 lines of code. So it's actually very short. And from the idea to execution, like till I was actually finished with the whole thing, was roughly 1 hour. And if you compare like having your own personal website, which you work with for months or weeks, comparing to like 1 hour, it's much easier to do. And this thing was seen by 3,000 people. So you get much less effort, but you still get more kind of like reach or visibility. And another examples I was doing, one of the first thing I also did was this sinus wave animation. I was just learning about SVGs, and I realized that you can generate SVG code from React. And the thing here is also it's roughly 100 lines of React code and React combined with SVGs. And it's not like a super complex project if you know these things. And this one I probably spent like a few days, but you don't have to spend weeks on it. And also this one I believe was seen by, I think, 10,000 people actually. Like this one was highlighted on the front page. Maybe it was even highlighted in their newsletter. I'm not sure. But my main saying is that you don't have to create some super complicated project just to do something cool. And you can still be proud of it, and you can still highlight in your CV, even though you only spend like 2 hours or a few hours with it. But if you want to do something more complicated, this one, for instance, is a full game. It's based on a mobile game that I tried to copy and recreate. This is a bit more complex. This one, I think it has like 500 lines of code. And what I'm trying to say with this one is that even if you have bigger projects, you can still do it on Codepen because you have a much bigger visibility. And yeah, I think this one's 17,000 views. So this is something I'm proud of. I can put in my CV. I'm going to show my CV at the end of this session. And yeah, so as you're learning things, just think about how could you use this, something that you just learned, how to do some quick demo in a few hours or a few days, and just create a project about it on Codepen, then tag them on Twitter and hope that you get highlighted. Now, the other cool thing about Codepen is you can also check out other people's work, of course. So if you're curious how this was done, then you just click it and check the source code. And you can get inspired by all the other people. You can follow them on Twitter. You can maybe make some collaboration, or you can fork their work. Like you can basically create a copy paste for yourself and just make it even better. So there's a lot of nice people around this community that you can connect with. And yeah. Now, if you still don't have inspiration, what Codepen also offers is they have weekly challenges. And this is going every week, and it's usually quite vague. Like this time, the theme of the month is Go Big. And the topic of the week is big footers. And this can be interpreted in multiple ways. You can either do a footer, like a classical footer on the bottom of your website with some nice layout, or you can do something with Bigfoot, the monster. And you can either draw something with CSS, have some nice graphics, or you can write an article about Bigfoot, or basically do anything you want. And then the weekly challenge is also featured in the weekly newsletter, where they highlight one of them. And you can also see what other people did during that week for this challenge. And if you do something crazy good, then you can also see yourself here. Now, that's mostly what I wanted to share about Codepen and why I like it's cool. But of course, if you still want to have your own personal website, I also have it. I have it on GitHub Pages, which I can recommend because it's a free page. Like you can have a free website there. Only thing is that the ending of your URL will be github.io. But actually, I think that's cool because this way you can show that you know Git. Now, the next topic I wanted to share is writing articles and why you should write articles, I believe. Now, articles or like writing is like a secret skill because you don't really think about writing as a skill you need as a developer. But if you think about it, when you're writing documentation or when you're doing code reviews and writing comments or just writing a commit message, that's all writing. And most people don't really like writing documentation because, first of all, they don't really know how to do it. They don't teach you these things at university of like how to write a technical documentation. But if you do it, if you practice it and you have it in your CV that you wrote all these articles, then maybe your future company will see that, oh, this guy already knows how to write articles and he's not going to bail out on writing documentation. And that's a good thing. The other thing is with writing article, it's actually harder than it looks because you want to have like in a short space, like you don't want to write long articles. No one's going to read super long articles. So you want to have condensed information, but you still want to be understandable. You still want to be understandable by people with different backgrounds. Some people know a lot about the topic. Some people don't really know anything. So writing a good article is actually much harder than it sounds. Now, where can you write articles? Like, first of all, where do people read articles? Like this is from stateofjavascript.com. This is a research. And the biggest places are CSS Tricks, Medium, Dev2, and Smashing Magazine. The good news is you can write articles for most of these places. Of course, with Dev2 and Medium, you can just go there and create an account and write an article. How it goes, honestly, I haven't used this one, but I imagine it's similar to Codepen. So just because you write an article, no one really going to see it unless you get highlighted somehow. And one idea you could do is if you have a project on Codepen, then you can write an article about how you did it, if there's something interesting about it. Like if you think about these rotating numbers with this countdown thingy, you can write an article about how to do 3D transformations and how you created this thing. Now, why is this cool to connect these two things is you can have a link in your Codepen to the article. And if you get highlighted in Codepen, then a lot of people are going to see your work, and they're going to see the link to the article, and then they go to Dev2. Or you can go the other way around. So you can have the Codepen embedded in the article. And if they see your article, then they're going to see your Codepen profile. And if you connect all these things, then you get a bigger reach in both places. Now, the next level thing is you can also write an article to CSS Tricks or Smashing Magazine, but getting there is much harder because they don't just have a button to like new article. You have to pitch yourself. You have to write them an email like, hey, I have this idea. Would you publish it? If you search for guest writing for CSS Tricks, there's an article writing what they are interested about, what you should write about, how you should write it, etc. And then at the bottom of the page, they have a pitch form where you can write like, this is my topic, roughly this is what I want to write. And they will maybe accept it or maybe not. Now, the thing with this is they don't just accept anything. They want to have a topic which was not covered before. So if you write an article about something that was covered in hundreds of articles already, they will reject. So it's much harder to get inside. It's harder to find a topic here. But if they accept it, the cool thing is about it, it sounds much better that you wrote an article and got published in a magazine. They pay you some few $100s, and it comes with a copywriter. So a professional writer is going to read your work and improve it to make it better. Now, the third thing you can do is Free Code Camp. Free Code Camp is also having a news section where you can write articles. And their audience is also students who are learning programming. So here you can publish beginner tutorials. It works a bit in between the previous two. So you also have to pitch yourself to become an author. So it's not that straightforward. But if they select you as an author, then you can write articles and tutorials. And the same goes that you can write an article about what you did in Codepen, and you just link the two things back and forth. Now, the cool thing about Free Code Camp is they do their own marketing. They have their own Twitter page and all the other sources, and they have thousands of followers. So if you write an article here and you link to something else you did, probably that something else will have a much bigger reach. Now, I think that's all about articles I wanted to share. And yes, a few more minutes on YouTube. I also started YouTube during the pandemic, and I would describe it as high frustration and exponential growth. And the high frustration is, it's a bit like writing an article. It has a beginning, it has an end, and there are steps in between. But you also want to record yourself, the sound, you want to edit the sound, you need to have lighting set up if you're making a video, you want to make slides. It's a lot of work. You're gonna spend weeks probably on like half an hour video, like at least that's what I do. And in the end, you don't really know how it will be received. Some videos just got ranked on YouTube and got like 30,000 views. Some got like 800. And it doesn't really matter like how much time you put in. Sometimes it just works better, sometimes it works worse. And especially at the beginning, when you only have one video, you put in the effort, you put like weeks of work, and then you got like a few hundred views. And that's a bit disappointing at the beginning. But that's when this exponential growth comes in, because at one point, as YouTube also figures out what sort of content you have, and it will find an audience for you, the numbers just keep on growing. And at one point, just for instance, having my first 1,000 followers was a bit slow. But after that, I didn't really publish any more videos because I didn't really have time with it. And it just went from 1,000 to 2,000 and without really doing anything. So you can go down with YouTube. And of course, you also have to do your marketing with YouTube. Just because you publish something, it won't be seen. And for instance, what I do here is usually I cover a tutorial that I have on Codepen. So I have the Codepen thingy, then I have a link in my Codepen thingy that, hey, if you want to learn how to do this, then there's this YouTube video. And then I also write an article on Free Code Camp, which is basically the written format of the video. and they start the article with like, hey, if you want to watch this in video format, just click here. And this is kind of like bootstrapping my videos to a few hundred or a few thousand views. And after that, YouTube figures out like, oh, okay, so that's sort of audience we want to match for this video. Okay, so that's on YouTube. And two quick other things. Twitter, my biggest thing with Twitter, as you see, I only have a few followers here. I was a bit late with Twitter. And when I was starting with Codepen, for instance, I didn't have Twitter yet. And that was quite a big of a mistake because I think it goes in parallel with YouTube. And the first few hundred followers are quite hard to get. And after that, it just starts to like explode. But I'm not there yet. So my biggest message here is that if you're not on Twitter right now, then just go register and follow some people from Codebar or Codepen or your favorite developers, and just keep on posting content, because the earlier you start with Twitter, the more followers you're gonna have. And the last thing I want to share is my CV, just to show how I put this together. I have basically like a front page, which is like a professional CV, you know, work experience, education, blah, 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 the usual stuff. And then I have a bonus page where I just highlight some of the things I do in general. And now I have here my YouTube channel, I have my Codepen profile, and I have my website. So if you want to get highlighted in your CV, also just add some images, for instance, like people never really have images in their CV. And yeah, feel free to copy paste this template, and good luck with finding a job in this way. And that's what I wanted to share. Let's see if you had some questions.
And we have had one question. I also have shared links to your YouTube and stuff, and I will also add all the links to video descriptions when they're uploaded as well. But there has been a question come in. Someone has said, writing articles and being published sounds daunting. Do you remember writing your first one?
Yeah, I also know that it feels a bit like, who am I to write an article? I'm still just learning these things, right? So it's not that obvious that you are good enough to write an article. For me, I think I had a niche topic that I went deep with, reactive programming, and I thought that this is cool, and I did something. I don't really remember the first one, but the second one was surely basically a tutorial about something I did. It was much more straightforward because I could just have some image, like just add some screenshot from the different phases of how you do something, and write an article about it. And you really don't have to write some super complex thing. You, like, as I said, you can pick like a 50 line of code and cover it in an article, because anything more than that is going to be too long. So you really don't have to overthink it.
Yeah, I totally agree. One of the first technical posts I ever wrote was a topic that I was actually frustrated with, which was I had been working at a company and we'd been using Webpack. And even though there was this Webpack config in the project, I was still really confused by it. So actually my first technical blog post was me figuring out and understanding what this Webpack config file did. And actually it was really good because I was learning and understanding it and writing it in a way for someone like me who could see this config file. And actually it went down really, really well, because loads of people were like, oh, I've also been really confused by this. And so, yeah, maybe pick something that you don't quite understand and learn and write it yourself.
Also, if you just find if you're following a tutorial, but you find it hard to understand, then feel free to write a better one, because you're the one who's learning things, right? So some of these tutorials are written by people who are already like a senior developer, and they're expecting that you understand these things, and maybe you don't, and that's completely fine. It's okay to not understand things. So maybe you can write an article which is going more into details and starts on an easier level.
Yeah. And then the second part to this question is, how do you choose what to write about?
Yeah, nowadays I try to connect these things, and as I said, like Codepen and YouTube, and basically I write a written format for my YouTube thingies. But for instance, I had this article once, which was actually published on CSS Tricks. It was one of those. I remember the React hooks came into picture, which was basically changing entirely how React programming works. And I wanted to do some animation. And I wanted to use request animation frame. And why this is an easy problem, and probably since that it got solved, I really didn't find a solution for it. I was Googling it. No one had a good answer how to use request animation frame with React hooks. The only thing I found was Dan Abramov's example of how to do it. But even with the example, I stared at it for like hours till I figured out how does it work. And then I figured out how does it work. And then I realized like, okay, so I just got a problem where there was no obvious solution. And I figured it out. And that's a good candidate for going to Smashing Magazine or CSS Tricks or any place like that. And you write a serious article that actually gets published.
So for those companies, when you got them listed on there, did you approach them about your idea?
Yes, exactly.
Perfect. Okay.
And it also happened that I had a different article and I wanted to write for Smashing Magazine, and I got a rejection because they said, "Sorry, we don't really see the article from this." And then I just went to CSS Tricks with the same pitch, and they accepted it. So what I'm saying is that you don't have to feel bad about being rejected. And even if you get rejected from both of them or anything else, you can still go with dev.to or medium.com and just write it yourself anyway.
It links very nicely to our first talk of the day, which is all about fear and failure and being resilient and still persisting even if you get a no. So yeah, a huge thank you for Hunor coming along today and giving this talk.